Hey, I'm Victor Lucas from Film Fury, and my buddy Johnny Millennium couldn't join me on this one because we can't watch every single thing together. I watched Ozark on Netflix. I've got my review for you, but first I have to thank our partners at the VFS School of Film. All right, I've been looking forward to this one. Ozark on Netflix is another one of these crime-infused dramas that seeps into a family's life. And the patriarch of that family is played by Jason Bateman, and he plays an accountant named Marty Byrdes. But he's not just any kind of accountant. He's a dirty accountant that's working for a Mexican cartel. And the lieutenant of that cartel is played by S.I. Morales. And he's situated in Chicago. And at the beginning of the show, we find out that Marty Byrdes and his partner have maybe been involved in a little bit of double dealing. So, of course, the cartel isn't too happy about that. And all kinds of heinous crime gets committed. And Marty Byrdes has to basically wrap his family up and get them out of Dodge as quickly as possible. And he comes up with a scheme to help pay back some of the debt that he owes the cartel. And he does this by moving his family to the Ozarks. And, you know, as the title implies, most of the drama that takes place in this first season takes place in this sort of rural area. And the family that's headed by Bateman, but also Laura Linney is the matriarch of this family, also conniving and very powerful in her own right. And they have two kids, a daughter and a son. They all pack up and move to the Ozarks and have to contend with, you know, sort of being a fish out of water, being city mice in the country. And we've seen this kind of thing happen before. They're basically, you know, on some kind of twisted sort of witness protection kind of deal, right? Except they're still dirty. They're still trying to figure out how to, you know, launder a bunch of money for the cartel. And they have impossible odds faced against them. They've got a time limit that they have to kind of prove that they can figure out how to work the system and pay back some money very quickly. And then if the cartel digs that, of course, they're going to be into them for a bunch more. Now, when the Byrdes family moves to the Ozarks, they find out that it's not just utopia, it's not just a bunch of you know, tourists that they can easily figure out how to take money from and also sort of work all kinds of angles so that they can launder tons of money. They've got a bunch of sort of inherent crime in the area that they have to contend with and butt up directly against, and it doesn't take very long. In fact, that's one of my issues with this show, is how quickly things progress in this thing. There is no breath in this show, and Marty Byrdes has to face up against all kinds of ridiculous challenge on a consistent basis. It feels like every episode his life is in jeopardy. He's got guns to his head. He's got people wanting to kill him, and he can kind of smooth talk and sweet talk his way out of every single thing just by pulling in all the facts and data around the numbers. And, you know, there's elements there that are really, really charming. It just sort of really hits you on, you know, the believability front, you know, whereas we've seen other crime dramas like The Sopranos and especially Breaking Bad, you know, deal with the nitty-gritty and the minutia and kind of a realistic sort of deep dive into how you would manage your life dealing with this really outlandish sort of criminal kind of activity. This show just sort of jumps right into it, and so every episode Marty is like buying businesses and sort of outwitting federal agents and also sort of staying one step ahead of the cartel, and then he finds other drug dealers that he has to kind of squabble with for a little while, but then he can kind of outwit them as well. And then the family gets embroiled, and there's a willingness and an acceptance on the family's part, and all of this just pushes against how much you're going to be able to believe everything that's going on. I mean, there's just too many implausible scenarios that happen throughout this show, and I feel like it's just been too rushed. I feel like, you know, Bateman, who's a fantastic actor, he's one of my favorite performers in Hollywood. I always like watching him do his thing. He is definitely hitting the Jason Bateman sort of you know, touch points, and you know, he's got that snark and that sarcastic, deadpan kind of delivery that I've always loved in here, and there is a sort of dark comedy kind of touch throughout the show, but it's just a little too pat. It's a little too quick and easy. And even though he deals with tremendous challenge and he has to overcome a lot of stuff, and it's cool to see our protagonist, our shady protagonist, kind of prevail, it feels a little artificial. And I kind of feel like this first season maybe should have been stretched into 2 seasons and give us a little bit more character study. They have some interesting characters and some fine actors in these roles, but we don't really get to believe them or get to know them, and they just feel kind of like props. They're just sort of put up against the backdrop of the Byrde family, and Bateman's there to kind of play off of them and to show how witty and funny he can be. And Laura Linney, I think, does a really competent job as the wife, who has also done some shady things, and there's some friction between the two of them that, you know, they have some nice meaty scenes together. But again, I feel like this show would have been better served if there had been you know, more of an investment to give us a little breath, give us a little time. And I just think back to Breaking Bad, which is the show that you're going to constantly reference as you watch this one. We've all seen Breaking Bad. It's you know, a high mark in the history of television, and I think this show really aspires to hit those marks, but it doesn't. And I think the biggest issue with it is that it's just progressing too quickly and putting, you know, Bateman and his family into harm's way too fast, and you just don't believe it. You feel like they would cut and run and get the hell out of there. And there are times in the show where, you know, definitely the idea of taking an easy way out or bolting for the exits feels like a more plausible kind of idea that the characters are kind of trying to present for themselves. I mean, this is an addictive show, and it's competently made, but it's underwhelming, and you know, it's kind of undercut by some choices for a little too much expediency. I would have liked a little more air in Ozark. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Hey, listen, if you watch Netflix shows like Ozark and you're inspired to go off and make your own, listen, you can learn to do that by taking the 1-year course at the Vancouver Film School of Film. To learn more, go to VFS.edu.